Today we're going to be looking at equivalent ratio tables. Ratio tables are a way for us to display equivalent ratios. Here's an example. Phyllis is making cookies. The recipe requires 3 eggs for every batch of cookies. What we want to know is how many eggs will Phyllis need to make 5 batches of cookies. We can display this information using what we call a ratio table. And the ratio table will display the number of batches of cookies we have compared to how many eggs we need total. So for example, the question says if she makes 1 batch of cookies, and I'll have this picture represent my 1 batch of cookies, it takes her 3 eggs. So inside this batch of cookies, she has used 3 eggs. Now, if she were to make 2 batches of cookies, that's like having 2 batches of cookies here. Each batch of cookies has 3 eggs, so it's 3 eggs and 3 eggs, which gives me a total of 6. If we can do the same thing, if she makes 3 batches of cookies, that's like having 1, 2, 3 batches of cookies. Each batch of cookies takes 3 eggs, so that would be 3, 6, 9 eggs total. Now what I want you to notice about ratio tables is ratio tables follow what we call a multiplicative pattern. They have a multiplicative relationship, which means we're going to be multiplying to get our answers. So I can pick any number for my batches of cookies. I could say we want 4 batches of cookies, and then all I would have to do to find my answer of how many eggs it would be is 4 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12. And I can prove it to you again down here with my circles. Look. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 batches of cookies. Each batch of cookies has 3 eggs, so that's 3, 6, 9, 12. Well, now let's answer the question we're being asked. How many eggs will Phyllis need to make 5 batches of cookies? So 5 batches of cookies times 3 eggs for every batch means she's going to need a total of 15 eggs. So the answer to our question is she needs 15 eggs. Now, these tables, when we do them, they have rules. And so we can write the rule for this table using words. We can say she has the batches of cookies, so we'll just call that the batches. However many batches of cookies she's making, we're going to multiply that by 3, and that will give me my number of eggs. And that's how we would write the rule for this table. Let's take a look at another one. It says Katie bought 2 pounds of gummy bears for $7. The first thing I want you to think about, 2 pounds of gummy bears for $7. Is this a unit rate? No, it's not a unit rate. A unit rate would represent the cost for 1 pound. This is the cost for 2 pounds. Okay, we also call a unit rate when we're talking about costs. We call that a unit price. And when we're working with a ratio table, a unit rate can be really helpful for us. So the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out the unit price, the cost for 1 pound. So if I were to buy 1 pound of gummy bears, how much would it cost? Well, I know for 2 pounds of gummy bears, it was $7. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this up the way we did before. And I'm going to say I've got 2 pounds of gummy bears, 2 pounds of gummy bears, and that is $7. But what I want is not 2 pounds of gummy bears. I just want to know how much 1 pound would be. So remember, when we did our unit rates, what we had to think about is what do I need to do to go from 2 pounds to 1 pound? And the answer is I'm going to divide by 2. So if I divide by 2 for my pounds, I have to divide by 2 for my cost, and we're going to find that this would equal $3.50. So 1 pound of gummy bears is going to equal $3.50. Okay, so we can use that information to help us with our table, because remember, it's a multiplicative pattern. So what I'm noticing is every time I have a pound, I'm going to multiply it by $3.50. Okay? Now that's a little bit tricky to do. And remember, what we've been doing in class, we are allowed to use a calculator. So here's what I want you to do, okay? So for 3 pounds, let me pull up my calculator here, and I'll get it off to the side so it's not blocking us too much. So I'll move it up and down a little bit. So I have 3 pounds, and I'm going to do times $3.50, and that will say 10.5. Now 10.5, that's not money. 10.5 means $10.50. So I have to write it very carefully like that. Okay, I'll move this down a little bit. Now the next thing we want to do is figure out how much would it cost for 4 pounds of gummy bears. So I'll put a 4 pounds up here. Okay, and then I'll go over to my calculator. I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to do 4 times $3.50. And I find out that that equals $14. Okay, and last but not least, I have one more column. I could count in order. I could say, how much would it be for 5 pounds of gummy bears? But the thing about a ratio table is I can pick any value I want to. Let's say I wanted to buy 8 pounds of gummy bears. I could put an 8 in my ratio table. And then I would just come over here to my calculator, and remember, my rule is I'm going to take my pounds and multiply it by $3.50, and I'm going to find out that that's a total of $28. Okay, and that's our ratio table for our gummy bears. Now, if I wanted to write words to explain the rule that I used here, think about what we did. We took our pounds of gummy bears, and we multiplied our pounds of gummy bears times $3.50. Okay? And that equaled the total cost of the gummy bears. And I can figure out my rule based on my unit price. So 1 pound of gummy bears is $3.50.